He spent his entire life building bridges out of the wreckage of the past. For master restorer Eli Vance, every rusted bolt and splintered piece of wood was a silent story waiting to be told. He believed he had seen every ghost the war had left behind. But one day, a discovery was made that would send a tremor through his quiet world. A plane that shouldn't exist, a relic from a day of infamy, was found perfectly preserved in a forgotten shipping crate. And the order came down: restore it. Make it fly again. For Eli, the grandson of a Pearl Harbor survivor, this wasn't just a job. It was a betrayal of a memory etched in fire and blood. Everyone told him to walk away, to let the past stay buried. But what happened when he looked past the symbol of war and saw the human hands that had built it? What happened when a mysterious letter, written by a young Japanese pilot, was found hidden in the cockpit? Get ready for a story not about the battles we fight, but about the fragile, unexpected bridges we build to find peace. Before we begin this incredible journey of healing and understanding, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this directly to you. Now, let's dive into Chapter 1. The Ghost in the Crate. The hangar at Vance Restoration was a cathedral of forgotten things. It smelled of aviation fuel, aged pine, and the faint metallic scent of history. Dust motes danced in the slanted afternoon light that cut through the high windows, illuminating the skeletal frames of a Piper Cub and AP-51 Mustang in various states of rebirth. At the center of it all, Eli Vance ran a cloth along the Mustang's wing, his movements practiced and reverent. At 72, his hands were gnarled from a lifetime of work, but they still held the steady precision of the engineer he'd once been. This was his sanctuary, his escape from the noise of the world. Here, the past was something you could hold, polish, and understand. It was logical. A broken fuel line could be fixed. A corroded wire could be replaced. The memories these planes carried, however, were a different kind of restoration, one he was less equipped to handle. The sharp crunch of gravel under tires broke the hangar's peace. A black government-issue SUV pulled up to the open doors, looking as out of place as a vulture in an aviary. Eli didn't look up. He knew who it was. David Chen, a brisk, efficient man from a subdepartment of the Smithsonian that handled logistically complex acquisitions, stepped out, clutching a tablet like a shield. "Eli," David greeted, his voice echoing in the vast space. "David," Eli replied, not pausing his work. "If you're here about the Mustang carburetor, it's still backordered. Can't make a part appear out of thin air." "It's not about the Mustang," David said, stopping a few feet away. He shifted his weight. "We have a new project for you. A unique one." Eli finally stopped polishing and looked at the man. David's face was a mask of professional neutrality, but Eli saw the flicker of apprehension in his eyes. "I'm busy, David. The Corsair project starts next month. My dance card is full. This can't wait. And it supersedes everything else." David swiped on his tablet and turned it towards Eli. The screen showed a photograph, taken inside a dark, wooden shipping crate. The image was grainy, but the shape was unmistakable to anyone who knew military history. The long, elegant nose, the iconic canopy, the wings that seemed too fragile to hold such a deadly purpose. It was a Mitsubishi A6M Zero. Eli's blood ran cold. He stared at the image, his mind recoiling. He took a slow step back, the polishing cloth falling from his hand onto the concrete floor. "No," he said, his voice a low rasp. "Eli, listen. Where did you find it?" Eli interrupted, his gaze still locked on the sinister silhouette. "Alaska. A construction crew breaking ground for a new resort near Unalaska. They found a sealed Quonset hut, left over from the war. This was inside, crated up since 1945. It's a time capsule, Eli. The preservation is miraculous." Eli turned his back on the tablet, walking towards his workbench, a scarred and stained piece of maple. He braced himself against it, his knuckles turning white. He could feel the old anger, a cold stone in his gut. His grandfather, a young fireman on the USS Nevada, had told him stories of that day. The screams, the oil, the fire on the water, the Zeros strafing the decks. The sound of their engines was a scream he'd carried in his nightmares until the day he died. "And you want me to what? Restore it?" Eli asked, the words tasting like ash. "Polish it up so it can be a trophy? A monument to the men who killed my grandfather's friends." "It's not a trophy, Eli. It's a historical document," David said, his voice softening, trying to find the right chord. "This specific plane, tail number and markings we've traced, was part of the second wave. It never made it back to its carrier. The pilot was forced to ditch it. It was recovered and shipped to the States for analysis. And then it was forgotten. It's one of the most complete, original Zeros in existence. We need to study it. To learn from it." "Learn what?" Eli snapped, turning around. "How efficient they were at killing. I know all about its lightweight construction and its maneuverability, David. My grandfather described it in graphic detail." "It's not about the war," David insisted, stepping closer. "It's about the machine. It's about preservation. This is your life's work, Eli. You don't just fix planes. You give them back their voice. All of them. The Allied, the Axis. They're all just machines now. They're all just history." Eli looked past David, out the hangar doors to the sprawling Montana sky. He thought of his grandfather's face, the deep, permanent sadness in his eyes. To work on this plane felt like a profound betrayal, like spitting on a grave. He was the keeper of that memory. This task was in desecration. "Everyone told me you'd say no," David said quietly, breaking the long silence. "They said the personal connection was too strong, that you wouldn't be able to see past the symbol." Eli remained silent, the weight of his family's history pressing down on him. "But I told them you were the best," David continued, "and that the best understands that true restoration isn't about picking and choosing which parts of history we like. It's about preserving the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it is." He placed the tablet on the workbench next to Eli. The image of the Zero glowed on the screen. "The truck will be here in 2 days with the crates. The decision is yours. You can send it back, and we'll find someone else. Someone who won't treat it with the respect it demands as an artifact." David turned and walked back to his SUV, leaving Eli alone in the cavernous hangar with the ghost. Eli stood there for a long time, the setting sun painting the walls in shades of orange and purple. He looked at the P-51, a symbol of American resilience. He looked at the photo of his grandfather on his desk. Then his eyes returned to the tablet, to the elegant, deadly shape in the darkness. It was just a machine, a collection of wood, fabric, and metal. But it was also a vessel for pain, for loss, for a national trauma. He picked up the cloth from the floor. The conflict was a storm inside him. To take this job was to betray a sacred family memory. To refuse it was to admit that the past still held him hostage, that he couldn't separate the artifact from the atrocity. He was a bridge builder, David had said. But could he build a bridge across an ocean of blood and memory? The suspense hung thick in the air. What would the master restorer do? Would he preserve the cold comfort of his old wounds, or would he confront the ghost in the crate and uncover the story it was waiting to tell? The first crate arrived at dawn. The weight of wings. The lowboy trailer, hauling 2 enormous weathered wooden crates, looked like a hearse for some forgotten giant. Eli watched from the hangar doorway, a cup of cold coffee forgotten in his hand, as the rig rumbled across his property. The morning was crisp, the Montana air sharp with the scent of pine, but the sight of those crates cast a pall over everything. He hadn't slept. The image of the Zero, the weight of David's words, and the ghost of his grandfather's stories had fought a war in his mind all night. No side had won. The driver, a burly man with a thick beard, hopped out and handed Eli a clipboard. "Sign here, boss. Got a special delivery from the Aleutians. Heavy son of a gun." Eli scrawled his name, a messy, angry signature. He directed the driver to position the crates at the far end of the hangar, away from his other projects. As the trailer was unhitched and the driver left with a wave, Eli was alone with them. The crates stood there, silent and imposing, their wood dark with age, stained by decades of salt and cold. They felt less like containers and more like tombs. For 3 days, he ignored them. He buried himself in the P-51's engine, tuning and adjusting with a ferocious focus. But his gaze kept drifting to the far end of the hangar. The crates were a gravitational pull, a dark star warping the space of his sanctuary. They didn't belong here. He didn't belong here, not with them. He was betraying his grandfather with every breath he took in their presence. On the fourth morning, he could stand it no longer. The silence from the crates was louder than any engine. He walked over, his boots echoing on the concrete. He ran a hand over the rough, splintered wood of the larger crate. It was just wood. Just nails. He had to start seeing it as parts, not as a whole. A problem to be solved, not a demon to be exorcised. He fired up his pneumatic crowbar and drill. The whine of the tools was a violation of the hangar's usual peace. With a series of protesting creaks and the shriek of nails yielding, he began to dismantle the crate. The wooden slats fell away one by one, revealing a darkness within. A faint, strange smell drifted out, a mixture of old fuel, preservative grease, and the unmistakable, dry scent of extreme age. As the last wall came down, the late morning light flooded the interior, and Eli's breath caught in his throat. The Mitsubishi A6M2 Zero was not just preserved. It was pristine. It sat on its landing gear, its fuselage a pale, ghostly gray-green. The Hinomaru, the red circle on the wings and fuselage, was faded but starkly visible. The canopy was clouded but intact. There were scars, a patched bullet hole in the tail, a long shallow dent along the engine cowling, but it was whole. It wasn't a wreck. It was a sleeping predator. It was more beautiful and more terrible than he had imagined. The conflict within him intensified. How could something so malevolent be so perfectly, mechanically beautiful? His engineering mind, a part of him he could never fully silence, began its assessment. The fabric on the ailerons looked taut. The tires, while flat, were intact. The three-bladed propeller was chipped but unbent. This was a restoration project unlike any other. It wasn't about rebuilding. It was about reawakening. For the next week, he worked in a state of grim detachment. He started with the external inspection, documenting every rivet, every panel seam. He avoided the cockpit. That felt too personal, like opening a coffin. He focused on the airframe, the landing gear, the engine. He pressurized the hydraulic system and was stunned to find it still holding a partial charge after 80 years. The Japanese engineering was a brutal, elegant marvel. The tension was a live wire inside him. Every time he made a connection with a machine, solving a puzzle of its design, admiring the simplicity of a linkage, a wave of guilt would immediately crash over him. He'd see his grandfather's face, hear the old tired voice saying, "They came out of the sun, Eli. You never saw them until it was too late." One afternoon, he decided he had to enter the cockpit. He couldn't put it off any longer. He brought a stepladder and a powerful work light. The canopy release was stiff, but with a careful application of lubricant and pressure, it gave way with a hollow thunk. He slid the canopy back. The smell that wafted out was more intimate now. Old leather, dried sweat, and the faint metallic hint of fear. He climbed in, his large frame filling the small, cramped space. The instruments were all there, their Japanese labels clear. The stick felt alien in his hand. His eyes scanned the panel, the seat, the controls. And then he saw it. Tucked into a narrow map slot beside the seat, wasn't a map. It was a small, yellowed envelope, sealed with a faded red wax stamp. His heart hammered against his ribs. This was no longer just a machine. This was a person. With trembling, grease-stained fingers, he carefully pried the envelope loose. The wax seal crumbled to dust. Inside was a single sheet of rice paper, covered in elegant, vertical Japanese script. He couldn't read a word of it. But at the bottom, there was something else. A small, carefully rendered ink drawing. It was of a bird, a crane, in flight, and beneath it, a single word in English, written in a hesitant, unpracticed hand. Sorry. The word hit Eli with the force of a physical blow. It was so small, so profoundly human, it shattered the monstrous symbol he had built in his mind. This wasn't just a weapon of war. This was a young man's cockpit. A young man who drew birds and who felt the need to apologize to a future he knew he would never see. The external conflict with his family's history was now a roaring internal storm. Who was this pilot? What was he sorry for? Was it for the war? For his own fate? The revelation was unexpected and devastating. The Zero was no longer just a ghost. It had a voice, a whisper from the past, and it was asking for something Eli didn't know how to give. The restoration was no longer about the machine. It was about the message. And Eli knew, with a terrifying certainty, that he had to deliver it. The echo in the paper. The hangar felt different. The air, once thick with the ghosts of American heroes, now also held the whisper of a single young Japanese man. Eli sat at his workbench, the fragile rice paper laid flat under the protective glass of a large picture frame he'd repurposed. The word, sorry, stared back at him, a stark, heartbreaking counterpoint to the elegant, unreadable script above it. It was an apology etched in ink, a sentiment that felt utterly alien when attached to the machine that loomed behind him. For 2 days, he couldn't bring himself to touch the Zero. The letter had changed everything. The conflict was no longer a simple binary of betrayal or duty. It had become a labyrinth. He was no longer just restoring an enemy aircraft. He was curating a dead boy's final confession, and he didn't understand it. The weight of it was paralyzing. His first instinct, a stubborn, angry one, was to burn the letter. To let this particular ghost stay buried. It was the easiest path. But the craftsman in him, the man who believed every artifact deserved its voice, recoiled at the thought. The boy who drew the crane and wrote, sorry, deserved to be heard. He needed a translator. Not just of language, but of context. He needed to know who this pilot was. Reluctantly, he called David Chen. He held his phone, listening to the ring, feeling like he was crossing a Rubicon. Eli, David answered, his voice cautious. I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I assumed the crates were on their way back by now. They're not, Eli said, his voice rough. I opened the cockpit. A pause on the other end. And there was a letter. A personal letter. In Japanese. Eli took a breath. I need it translated. And I need everything you have on the pilot of this plane. Tail number BII 124. The silence from David's end was longer this time, heavier. BII 124. That was the number we traced. The pilot was Flight Petty Officer Kaito Tanaka. He was 20 years old. Part of the Kaga's fighter group in the second wave. His plane was hit by anti-aircraft fire over Pearl Harbor. He managed to ditch it near the entrance channel. He was recovered alive by a U.S. destroyer, the USS Cassin. He died of his wounds in a POW camp in California 3 months later. The information landed like successive blows. A name. Kaito Tanaka. An age. 20. A fate. Died in captivity. The monstrous, faceless enemy in the Zero now had a name, a age, and a tragic end. Eli felt the ground shift beneath him. The narrative of pure villainy he'd clung to was crumbling, revealing a much more complicated and far more painful truth. Send me the letter, David said, his voice soft. I know someone. Eli took a high-resolution photograph and sent it. The wait that followed was the most agonizing of his life. He paced the hangar, his eyes flicking from the proud lines of the P-51 to the silent, sorrowful Zero. 2 machines of war, 2 young men who never grew old. The parallel was inescapable and deeply unsettling. His phone buzzed an hour later. It was David, but he wasn't alone. A woman's voice, gentle and aged with a soft Japanese accent, came on the line. Mr. Vance? My name is Hana Ito. I am a historian. David has asked me to translate the letter for you. Eli's grip tightened on the phone. Thank you. Please, go ahead. There was a rustle of paper. Hannah took a slow, steadying breath. My dearest Hannah, she began, and the use of her own name sent a shiver down Eli's spine. It was a different Hannah, a ghost from the past. If you are reading this, then I have failed to return. Do not mourn me for long. I think of you now, as I fly into the dawn. I picture you painting by the stream near our home, the one with the cherry blossoms that fall like pink snow. I carry that image with me. It is more beautiful than any flag or any victory. The world has become a strange and terrible place. They tell us we are heroes, that we fight for the glory of the emperor. But today, as we flew over the ships, I saw only fire and confusion. I saw men, little figures jumping into water burning with oil. I did not feel like a hero. I felt like a bringer of sorrow. I have become a demon from the sky. I am sorry, Hannah. I am sorry for the pain my absence will cause you and Mother. I am sorry for the destruction I have been a part of. I am sorry that the world we knew is gone. I drew for you the crane, for it symbolizes long life and peace. Two things I fear I will never see again. My wish is not for glory, but for your happiness in a peaceful world. That is the only victory that matters to me now. With all my heart, your brother, Kaito. By the time Hana Ito finished, Eli was sitting on the stepladder, his head in his hand, the phone pressed hard to his ear. He was trembling. There were no tears, just a vast, hollowing ache. The letter wasn't a confession of a monster. It was the lament of a homesick boy, an artist trapped in a soldier's uniform, a brother filled with regret. The sorry wasn't just a word. It was an ocean of grief and shattered innocence. Mr. Vance. Hannah's voice was gentle. This letter. It is a very significant historical document. It shows a side of the war we rarely see. He was just a boy, Eli whispered, the words torn from him. Yes, Hannah said softly. They were all just boys. After he hung up, Eli sat in the profound silence for a long time. The emotional tension that had been coiling inside him for weeks had finally snapped, not in anger, but in a devastating wave of shared humanity. Kaito Tanaka wasn't his enemy. Kaito Tanaka was a kid who missed his sister and loved cherry blossoms. A kid who was scared, a kid who was sorry. He stood up and walked slowly towards the Zero. He no longer saw a weapon. He saw Kaito's cockpit. He saw the cramped space where a young man had his final, private thoughts of home and regret. He placed his hand on the cool metal skin of the fuselage, near the patched bullet hole. It was an act of reconciliation, not with a nation or a war, but with a single lost soul. The external conflict had been resolved, but a new, more urgent one took its place. The restoration was no longer an academic exercise or a personal trial. It was a promise. He had to make this plane fly again. Not for the Smithsonian, not for history books, but for Kaito. He had to give this silent apology a voice that could soar through the peaceful Montana sky that Kaito had never lived to see. The race was on. The weight of a young man's final words now rested on Eli's old, tired shoulders. Failure was no longer an option. The crane's flight. A new and urgent energy electrified the hangar. The grim detachment was gone, replaced by a sense of sacred purpose. Eli was no longer just a restorer. He was an archaeologist of a human soul, and every piece of the Zero he touched felt like a fragment of Kaito Tanaka's story. The conflict had melted away, leaving behind a clear, singular mission: make the crane fly. The work was grueling. The Nakajima Sakae engine was a complex puzzle of precision and age. Seals had petrified, cylinders were frozen, and corrosion lurked in hidden fuel lines. For weeks, Eli lived surrounded by engine parts, his hands black with grease, his mind consumed by Japanese engineering diagrams David had procured for him. He worked 18-hour days, fueled by coffee and the haunting image of the young pilot's words. He wasn't fixing a warbird. He was building a memorial. The emotional tension now came from a different source: the fear of failure. What if he couldn't do it? What if the engine never turned over, or a spar was too badly damaged, and this last, physical testament to Kaito's apology remained earthbound? The pressure was immense, a constant, silent companion. He hired an assistant, a young, brilliant mechanic from town named Jake, who saw the project not as history, but as the coolest challenge imaginable. Jake's innocence, his pure love for the machine, was a balm to Eli's heavy heart. "Check the magneto timing again, Jake," Eli would say, his voice calm but firm. "It has to be perfect." "It will be, Eli," Jake would reply, his enthusiasm undimmed. "She wants to fly. You can feel it." The big day arrived. shrouded in a low, morning mist. The engine, reassembled and reinstalled, was a testament to their toil. The propeller stood ready. A fuel truck had delivered a special batch of high-octane avgas, the closest they could get to what the Zero would have used. David Chen was there, standing silently off to the side, his tablet absent for once. He understood the significance of the moment. Eli climbed into the cockpit. It felt different now. It wasn't an alien space. It was Kaido's office. He had polished the glass of the instruments until they shone. He had carefully cleaned the leather of the seat. The framed letter, with its crane and its single English word, was secured in a safe place in his office. He didn't need to see it. He had memorized it. He went through the startup sequence, his movements slow and deliberate. He primed the engine, feeling the fuel pressure build. He set the throttle. He took a deep breath, his finger hovering over the ignition switch. This was it. Not just a test of mechanics, but a test of forgiveness, of understanding. "Clear prop," he yelled out the open canopy. Jake gave a thumbs up, his face a mask of anticipation. Eli engaged the starter. The engine groaned, a deep, metallic sound of protest after 80 years of silence. It turned over once, twice, then sputtered. A cough of black smoke erupted from the exhaust. Eli's heart sank. He adjusted the mixture and tried again. Another groan, another sputter. The suspense was agonizing. Was it all for nothing? He closed his eyes for a second, picturing not the machine but the boy who loved cherry blossoms. He tried a third time. The engine coughed, then caught. It roared to life with a sudden, deafening, visceral fury that shook the entire hangar. The three-bladed propeller became a transparent disc. A blast of wind whipped through the space, sending dust and papers flying. The sound was not the refined purr of a modern engine. It was a raw, powerful snarl, the unmistakable voice of a wartime fighter. It was the sound that had once heralded death and terror. But today, it sounded different. Today, it sounded like freedom. Eli let it run, feeling the powerful vibrations course through the airframe, through the seat, through his very bones. He looked out at Jake, who was jumping up and down, pumping his fist in the air. He looked at David, who simply nodded, a look of profound respect on his face. Tears, unbidden and free, streamed down Eli's weathered cheeks. They were not tears of sadness, nor of victory. They were tears of release. In that thunderous roar, he heard it all, the horror of Pearl Harbor, his grandfather's pain, Kaido's fear, and his own long-held anger. And he heard it all finally, blessedly, begin to fade, replaced by the unifying power of a story finally, fully told. He had done it. He had given the ghost a voice. The crane was ready to fly. Weeks later, on a day of impossible blue sky, the Zero sat at the end of the grass runway of Eli's private airfield. A certified test pilot, a veteran himself, was at the controls. Eli, Jake, and David watched from the sidelines. With a rising snarl, the Zero raced down the field, its landing gear lightened, and then, gracefully, it lifted into the vast Montana sky. It climbed, not as a demon, but as a silver crane, its form elegant against the sun. It was a moment of breathtaking beauty, a paradox of peace born from war. It was Kaido's apology, finally airborne, a silent message of regret and hope etched against the heavens. Eli Vance watched until it was a speck, a bridge finally built across an ocean of time and tears, his own heart feeling, for the first time in decades, truly, peacefully, light. If this story of healing and unexpected connection moved you, if you believe in the power of understanding our shared history, then help us share more tales like this. Please, subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. It truly makes a difference. Let us know in the comments what this story meant to you. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an inspiring journey. Thank you for watching.